Let's be real, unless you've been totally off the grid, you've heard the non-stop buzz about drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. They're literally everywhere, completely changing how we talk about weight loss. But what if I told you that's just the opening act of a much bigger and honestly way more interesting story?
Right, because this isn't just about weight, not even close. This drug is pulling back the curtain on these incredible connections inside our own bodies, and it's pointing us toward a whole new frontier in medicine that goes way, way beyond the number on a scale.
So, before we jump into all its hidden superpowers, let's do a quick refresh on what this drug, semaglutide, actually is.
Okay, so the active ingredient we're talking about is semaglutide. It's part of a class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists, which I know sounds super technical. But all it really means is that it mimics a natural hormone we all have in our gut. This hormone is a major player in managing our appetite and blood sugar, which is exactly why semaglutide was first a go-to for type 2 diabetes, and now, of course, for weight management. But as we're about to see, its influence spreads much, much further, starting with one of our most important organs.
And that brings us to the first huge discovery that has nothing to do with your waistline. It turns out this drug has an incredibly powerful protective effect on the heart.
Now, just listen to the words on this slide for a second. Foundational pillar. That is an unbelievably strong statement, especially coming from a leading cardiac surgeon. We're not talking about some minor side benefit here. This suggests a fundamental shift in how we could treat the #1 cause of death in the world.
And look, this isn't just some expert's opinion. It's backed by a number that's a genuine game changer, 22%. So what does this actually mean for your heart?
So where does this number come from? A massive study called the SELECT trial, and it found that for patients who are already at high risk, semaglutide cut the total number of cardiovascular events. We're not just talking about the first heart attack or stroke, but any that follow too, by a whopping 22%. Trust me, in the world of cardiology, that is a huge deal.
But the heart is only one piece of this puzzle. The plot really thickens when we look at another crucial organ that's in the middle of a silent but massive crisis: the liver.
Just try to wrap your head around this for a second. More than 30% of all adults on the entire planet are affected by a serious liver condition that most people have never even heard of.
It's called metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease. Let's just call it MASLD. All it is, really, is a buildup of fat in the liver that has nothing to do with alcohol. But that fat can kick off a chain reaction of inflammation and damage, and in the worst cases, it can lead to cirrhosis and even liver failure. For a long time, scientists had a pretty simple theory about how it all went down.
They called it the two-hit hypothesis. It was pretty straightforward. Hit number 1, fat builds up in the liver. Hit number 2, something else comes along, like inflammation, and damages that now vulnerable fatty liver. Nice and simple. But it turns out the real story is way more complicated.
The new way of thinking about it is the multiple hit hypothesis. And this really shows you what's going on. It's not one or two things. It's more like a perfect storm of factors. Problems with insulin, hormones coming from fat tissue, what you eat, the bacteria in your gut, your genes, all of these things are hitting the liver at the same time.
Okay, so if this disease is that complex, you have to wonder, how on earth is semaglutide able to help? How is it pulling this off? And this, right here, is the central mystery that has had scientists fascinated. Remember, semaglutide works by targeting those GLP-1 receptors. But here's the puzzle. The human liver doesn't really have them. So how can a drug help an organ that it can't even talk to?
Well, the answer is pretty incredible. The drug doesn't work on the liver directly at all. Instead, you should think of it like mission control. Semaglutide's main target is actually the brain, which then coordinates a whole-body response. Now, I know this diagram looks a little busy, but the main idea is actually really simple. See up at the top? Semaglutide hits the brain. That's step 1. That action is what reduces your appetite. That's the effect everyone knows about. But just follow the arrows down. That one signal in the brain kicks off this cascade of positive effects throughout the entire body, which ultimately helps out the liver and even your gut. It improves your whole metabolic system.
So think about this amazing chain reaction of indirect benefits. The brain signal means you eat less, so fewer fatty acids get sent to the liver. Your body gets way better at handling insulin, which cuts down on fat storage. The liver's own little fat-making factory slows down. Inflammation across the body is reduced. It's a multi-front attack on liver disease, and the whole thing is being orchestrated from a distance by the brain.
But as amazing as all this is, it's not a magic cure. There's nuance here.
and it's really important to understand where the drug's limitations are right now.
So here's the big takeaway from all the clinical trials so far. Semaglutide is fantastic at dealing with the early stages of liver disease. It helps clear out the fat, it calms down inflammation, but the big challenge, the final boss, is something called fibrosis. That's the advanced scarring that leads to cirrhosis. And so far, it doesn't seem like this drug can reverse scarring that's already there.
But the story isn't finished. Research is still full steam ahead. There's a huge trial called the ESSENCE trial happening right now that's looking at whether higher doses over a longer time can finally start to make a dent in that fibrosis. So, this is a developing story. So when you just step back for a second, the whole journey is pretty incredible. We started with the drug that everyone just thought of for weight loss, then we found out it could protect the heart. Now we see it as a legitimate therapy for the liver. What this drug is really doing is showing us in stunning detail just how deeply connected all our body's systems are. And that leaves us with one final really big thought. Maybe drugs like semaglutide are the first sign that we're entering a totally new era of medicine. One where we stop treating obesity, heart disease, and liver disease as three separate problems, and instead we start treating the one thing that connects them all, our metabolism.